30 foods you eat every week are not what they say they are. Not suspicious products, not sketchy brands. The exact things in your fridge and pantry right now. Yogurt, cheese, olive oil, even ice cream. The food industry didn't lie. They just changed the definitions without telling you. This is the list, and number 1 is the one that surprises people most. Let's get into it. Number 30, vitamin water. Every morning, someone walks past the soda, picks up a vitamin water, and feels good about it. It says vitamin right on the label. How bad could it be? Here's what that label doesn't lead with. A single bottle can contain around 32 grams of sugar, almost identical to a standard soft drink. The vitamins are real, but they're sitting inside something that functions almost identically to the soda it replaced. Both the health claim and the sugar load arrive together, and most people only register one of them. Nobody is fooled by the sweetness. They're fooled by the name. The word vitamin signals health before a single ingredient gets read. The label wins before the product can explain itself. That's not a mistake. That's the design. Number 29, strawberry yogurt. Strawberry yogurt has a reputation it's been quietly borrowing for years. It's the breakfast people feel good about. Fruit, probiotics, a healthy morning routine. Parents buy it for their kids. Adults reach for it as the lighter option. But in many products, the strawberry flavor doesn't come from strawberries. The pink color doesn't come from fruit. Both come from food coloring and artificial flavoring. And the sugar content in some varieties sits closer to dessert than breakfast. Here's what makes this one different. Nobody buys strawberry yogurt because it's sweet. They buy it because it feels healthy. That feeling is often the actual product being sold. The yogurt is just how it gets delivered. Number 28, blueberry muffins. Look at a blueberry muffin from any coffee shop or grocery bakery. Blue pieces visible through the golden surface. The right color, shape, and size. In many mass-produced muffins, those pieces are not blueberries. They're manufactured inserts, made from sugar, starch, corn syrup, and food coloring, built to hold their appearance through industrial baking temperatures. Real blueberries don't survive that process reliably. They vary in size, cost more, and break down inconsistently at scale. A substitute can be made identically, at a fraction of the cost, for every muffin in every batch. Nobody reads the ingredient list on a muffin. They see blue and make the assumption the product was built around that assumption from the start. The blue is real. The blueberry isn't. Number 27, fruit juice cocktails. The front of the bottle is doing a lot of work. Photographs of whole oranges, fresh berries, ripe grapes. Everything signals wholesome. You pick it up for your family feeling like you made a smart call. Then you turn it around. Many fruit juice cocktails contain as little as 10% real fruit juice. In some products, 90% is water, corn syrup, citric acid, sweeteners, and artificial flavoring. The phrase "made with real fruit juice" is technically accurate. It just means some juice exists somewhere in the formula, not that the product is mostly fruit. When a drink has more sugar than actual fruit, it has more in common with soda than with anything growing on a tree. The photograph isn't a lie. It's just persuasion on behalf of very little fruit. Number 26. Pancake syrup. There's a bottle of syrup in millions of kitchens. Been there for years. Images of maple trees, autumn forests, something natural and timeless on the label. Most of it has nothing to do with maple. Real maple syrup comes from tree sap, a slow, seasonal process tied to specific climates. That's why it costs what it costs. The syrup most people grew up with is corn syrup, caramel coloring, and an artificial maple compound made in a lab. And here's what makes this genuinely unusual. For most people, the imitation didn't replace the original. The flavor they associate with maple pancakes is the industrial version. And it's the only one they've ever tasted. The real thing would actually taste unfamiliar. Number 25. Cool Whip. Cool Whip has been on holiday tables and birthday cakes for decades. White, fluffy, holds its shape perfectly. It sits in the dairy aisle right next to real whipped cream with no obvious distinction. Here's what most people have never been told. The original Cool Whip formula contained little to no actual cream. It was built around hydrogenated vegetable oils, high fructose corn syrup, and stabilizers engineered to mimic whipped cream at a much lower cost. It also freezes and rethaws almost perfectly, something real cream can't do, which made it commercially very useful. It didn't succeed by hiding what it was, it succeeded by so completely mimicking what it wasn't that the question never came up. Most people used it for years before anyone looked at the ingredient list. Sometimes the most effective imitation is the one that never makes you curious enough to check. Number 24, imitation crab. If you've eaten a California roll, a seafood salad, or a budget seafood platter, there's a real chance you've eaten imitation crab. When most people hear what it actually is, the reaction isn't skepticism, it's genuine surprise. Because it looks like crab, tastes like crab, sits on menus right next to real crab with no explanation. Imitation crab is made from surimi, a paste of processed white fish, usually Alaskan pollock, blended with starch and seasoning, colored red and white to resemble crab meat, and shaped into the flaked form people associate with crab legs. Millions of pounds consumed every year by people who never thought to question it. Pollock is a real fish. This isn't a safety issue, but there's a meaningful difference between crab and a fish paste engineered to play that role, especially when you're paying seafood prices, assuming you know what you ordered. Number 23. Non-dairy creamer has been part of their morning for 20 or 30 years. A spoonful into the coffee, a stir, and the bitterness softens. It feels like cream, pours like cream. In many products, there is no cream at all. Non-dairy creamer is typically made from vegetable oils, corn syrup solids, emulsifiers, and phosphates, an industrial formula designed to replicate dairy without using any. The texture is produced chemically. The richness is simulated. The name creamer describes what the product does, not what it contains. It adds a creamy quality. That's not the same thing as adding cream. Which one has surprised you most so far? Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious what people didn't see coming. Number 22. Chicken nuggets. Most people carry a simple picture of a chicken nugget. A piece of breast meat, cut into a shape, breaded and fried. The name suggests it. The branding confirms it. In practice, many nuggets aren't cut from a piece of chicken. They're shaped from one. The process involves mechanically separating meat from the bone, blending it with skin, binding agents, seasonings, and texture modifiers, then pressing the mixture into uniform shapes before breading and frying. The shapes are identical not because chickens produce identical cuts, but because the same machine stamps them out the same way every time. One has an origin, the other has a manufacturing process. When someone describes a nugget as a little piece of chicken, they're describing the design intent, not the production reality. The protein is real, but what you're eating and what you picture when you eat it are two different things. Number 21, white tuna. You sit down at a sushi restaurant. You order white tuna, the server confirms it. The menu says so. The fish arrives with exactly the texture and color you expected. Then, DNA testing gets involved. A series of independent food investigations found that fish sold as white tuna at restaurants across the country was frequently a completely different species, escolar, which looks similar but sells for considerably less than genuine tuna. To the naked eye, the difference is nearly impossible to detect. DNA doesn't make that mistake. And it goes beyond the label. Escolar contains waxy compounds that some digestive systems can't fully process, which can cause real physical discomfort after eating larger portions. Many diners experienced that without ever understanding why, because they were never told what they'd actually eaten. You ordered tuna, the menu said tuna, the biology on the plate said something else. Number 20. Bacon bits. Bacon bits are a small thing, a sprinkle on a salad, a hit of smoky crunch, and you move on. Nobody examines them closely, but here's the detail most people have never checked. Some of the most widely sold bacon bit products contain no bacon at all. They're made from textured soy protein, colored with food dye for that reddish-brown look, and flavored with artificial smoke compounds replicating cooked pork. In every practical sense, they're a soy product in a bacon costume. The clearest tell is shelf life. Real cooked bacon spoils within days at room temperature. Soy-based bacon bits sit in a cabinet unchanged for months. When something carries the word bacon but behaves like a pantry staple, the label is worth a second look. Number 19, deli turkey and ham. Behind the deli counter, the sliced turkey and ham look almost too perfect. Identical thickness, uniform color, no uneven edges, no connective tissue. Nothing that looks like it came from an actual animal. That uniformity is the tell. In many deli meat products, what you're looking at isn't a whole cut that's been sliced. It's a restructured product, meat that's been chopped, combined with water, salt, phosphates, and binding agents, then pressed into a block and sliced into those clean, consistent pieces. The practical consequence is water. The brine adds significant moisture that binding agents hold inside the product. When you're buying by the pound, part of what's on the scale is retained water, not just protein. Number 18, processed cheese slices. Those individually wrapped yellow squares have been on burgers and sandwiches for generations. They melt perfectly every time. But look at the package carefully. Many don't say cheese. They say pasteurized processed cheese food or cheese product. That's not a formatting choice. That's a legal classification. Some of these products contain as little as 51% actual cheese. The rest is vegetable oils, whey, emulsifying salts, and additional proteins that create the uniform texture and extended shelf life. Each slice can carry around 250 milligrams of sodium. Stack a few on a sandwich, and you've added a meaningful amount of salt before the meal has started. What many people grew up thinking of as cheese is, legally, only partially cheese. Number 17, guacamole. Guacamole belongs on health-focused menus for a real reason. Avocados are nutritionally solid, healthy fats, fiber, micronutrients. Ordering it feels like a deliberate good choice. That choice rests on one assumption, that what you're eating is mostly avocado. In mass-produced guacamole, avocados are expensive, spoil quickly, and are hard to manage at volume. So some manufacturers cut the avocado and replace it with vegetable oils, starches, and fillers that approximate the creaminess of the original. The green color is often maintained artificially so the product looks fresh longer than a real avocado would allow. People buy guacamole because of the avocado. The moment that content drops, the nutritional reason for buying it disappears with it. What's left is the color, the texture, and the reputation, while the ingredient that built that reputation has been quietly reduced. Number 16. Pre-shredded cheese. Grating your own cheese is a minor inconvenience most people are happy to skip. Bags of pre-shredded cheese are quick and convenient, but there's a coating on those shreds most people don't know about. To prevent clumping inside the bag, manufacturers coat the strands with cellulose, a plant-based anti-caking agent. It's not a health risk, but it interferes with melting. That coating on each strand prevents the clean, even melt and stretch you get from freshly grated cheese. There's also a cost irony. Pre-shredded cheese typically costs more per ounce than block cheese. You pay a premium for convenience and get cheese that's slightly worse for the main thing most people buy it for. Number 15. Parmesan cheese. Parmesan is the premium choice the one people reach for when they want real flavor and quality. Food testing has complicated that reputation. Some products sold as Parmesan have been found to contain cellulose levels much higher than consumers would expect, the same plant-based filler used in pre-shredded products, present in something people specifically pay more for, assuming it's mostly cheese. Cellulose isn't harmful, but it creates a real gap between what the label implies and what's in the container, and testing has shown that gap exists more often than most people would expect. Number 14. Wasabi. Almost everyone who's eaten sushi thinks they've tasted wasabi. That sharp nasal heat beside the soy sauce is one of the most recognizable parts of the dining experience. Most people have never actually tasted real wasabi. Genuine wasabi is one of the hardest plants in Japanese cuisine to grow. It needs cold running water, specific temperatures, significant shade, and up to 2 full years before it's ready. Supply is almost entirely limited to Japan and a very small number of specialist growers. What most restaurants outside Japan serve is horseradish, mustard powder, and green food coloring. The heat sensation is closely replicated, but the real flavor of genuine wasabi, subtler, more layered, genuinely different, is essentially absent. The substitution works because people expect heat. The substitute delivers heat. Without a reference point for the original, most diners never realize what they've been missing. Number 13. Vanilla products. Vanilla appears in more products than almost any other flavor. Ice cream, cereals, protein bars, coffee drinks, baked goods. Most people encounter it multiple times a day without registering it. Almost none of what they're tasting has ever come from a vanilla bean. Real vanilla is one of the most expensive spices in the world. The orchids need hand pollination in most growing regions, followed by months of curing before the flavor compounds develop. There genuinely isn't enough supply to meet global food production demand at scale, so the industry built a replacement: synthetic vanillin, a compound that reproduces the primary flavor note of real vanilla at a fraction of the cost. Around 99% of vanilla flavoring used in commercial food products is synthetic. Labels typically say vanilla flavor, not vanilla. That's technically accurate, but the warmth and naturalness the word implies rarely reflects the industrial compound actually creating the flavor. Number 12, truffle oil. A few drops of truffle oil over a dish and the whole thing feels elevated. Expensive, like someone in the kitchen actually cared about the ingredients. In most commercial truffle oils, the truffle isn't in the bottle. The flavor comes from a synthetic aromatic compound made in the lab to replicate a single note from the scent profile of real truffles. It costs very little to produce, and can be added at intensities impossible with actual truffles. This is why respected chefs have spoken out against truffle oil for years. It doesn't capture the complexity of a real truffle. It captures one loud, recognizable signal, just enough for most diners to accept it without questioning the source. Truffle oil sells the feeling of having truffles. That's not the same product, especially when the price suggests otherwise. Number 11. Honey. Real honey crystallizes. After sitting at room temperature over time, pure honey develops visible crystals, a cloudy, grainy texture that most people assume means it's gone bad. The opposite is true. Crystallization is a natural property of genuine honey, and actually signals quality. But the market wants clear, golden, perfect-looking honey. So most of what reaches grocery shelves has been heavily filtered and heat processed to prevent crystallization. And in that process, something important gets removed: pollen. Pollen is the primary tool used to trace where honey came from and verify it's authentic. Without it, the supply chain becomes very hard to audit. Lower quality honey of uncertain origin can sit alongside premium products with no way for shoppers to tell the difference. A beautiful clear jar doesn't mean better honey. Sometimes it just means honey that's been processed to look the way people expect. Number 10. Cinnamon. Cinnamon is one of the most automatic purchases in any grocery store. A sprinkle on oatmeal, a dash in coffee, a standard ingredient in dozens of recipes. Inexpensive, familiar, and associated by many with genuine health benefits. Most of it isn't the cinnamon people think they're buying. 2 separate plants are sold under the cinnamon label. Ceylon is true cinnamon, lighter in flavor, lower in a compound called coumarin, and more expensive. Cassia is the cheaper, more widely available variety, filling the majority of grocery store jars. The distinction matters because cassia contains significantly higher coumarin levels than Ceylon. Health guidelines identify thresholds where regular coumarin intake becomes a legitimate concern, particularly for people who take cinnamon daily as a supplement. 2 different products, one name, meaningfully different chemical profiles. Most buyers have never been given the information to know which one they're actually purchasing. Number 9. Instant mashed potatoes. Nobody buying instant mashed potatoes expects them to be identical to fresh. The convenience is the whole point. That's an honest trade. But most people have never thought about how far a potato travels to become a shelf-stable flake. It gets cooked, dehydrated, processed, and packaged, a sequence that strips away much of the natural flavor and nutritional content. Manufacturers then add salt, flavorings, and other ingredients to return some version of potato taste to the finished product. The result has considerably more sodium than most people expect, and considerably less nutritional resemblance to a real potato than the branding suggests. It's not fake food, but it's real food that's been processed so extensively that what arrives in the bowl is a substantially changed version of where it started. Number 8. Margarine. Margarine has one of the more unusual backstories in food history. It was invented in the 19th century to answer a competition calling for a cheaper alternative to butter. Not a better one. Cheaper. Specifically for feeding soldiers and lower-income populations who couldn't afford dairy. Over the following decades, that origin got buried. Margarine was repositioned as the modern, science-backed, heart-healthy choice. The product for people who'd done their research. Then the research caught up with it. Many older margarine formulas contain trans fats, an artificially solidified fat type later linked to serious cardiovascular risk. The product marketed as better for your heart carried its own significant health implications. Modern margarine has largely removed trans fats, but the foundation remains the same. Vegetable oils, water, emulsifiers, and yellow coloring added so the product resembles butter. Without that coloring, most formulas would look nothing like what they're imitating. It's a lesson that not everything positioned as better actually turns out to be. Number 7. Chocolate coatings. Chocolate has a legal definition in most countries. To carry that name, a product must contain a minimum amount of cocoa butter, the natural fat from cacao beans that gives real chocolate its texture and the way it melts at body temperature. When cocoa butter gets replaced with palm oil or other vegetable fats, the product no longer qualifies, so the label says chocolatey coating, chocolate-flavored coating, or compound chocolate. Walk through any candy aisle and you'll find dozens of products with glossy brown coatings that virtually every shopper instinctively calls chocolate. The real difference shows up in texture and mouthfeel. Real chocolate melts in a specific characteristic way that vegetable oil substitutes don't fully replicate. The motivation is simple economics. Cocoa butter is expensive, vegetable oils are cheap. Across millions of units annually, that cost gap is enormous. The consumer rarely notices. The manufacturer calculates it precisely. Number 6. Bottled water. Bottled water might be one of the most effective pieces of modern branding ever executed. Take a freely available resource, filter it, seal it in plastic, put a mountain on the label, and sell it for hundreds of times what it costs to produce. A significant number of bottled water brands use treated municipal water, the same source as the tap, with additional filtration before bottling. The final product is often clean and safe. That's not the issue. The issue is the story. The mountain on the label is positioning, not geography. The water is usually the cheapest component of the entire product. The real costs are the plastic, the transport, and the marketing that turns tap water into a lifestyle purchase. What's often being sold isn't water, it's the feeling of having made a health-forward choice. And that feeling costs considerably more than what's in the bottle. If this video has been useful so far, a like genuinely helps. It tells the algorithm this is worth showing to more people. Number 5. Sandwich bread. Ask someone 100 years ago how bread was made, and they could tell you from memory. Flour, water, yeast, salt, 4 ingredients. No recipe card needed. Pick up a standard supermarket loaf today and read the back. Many varieties list more than 20 ingredients. Emulsifiers, preservatives, dough conditioners, added sugars, and sometimes caramel coloring to make a light wheat loaf appear darker and more wholesome than it actually is. This isn't negligence. It's logistics, bread that has to survive weeks on a shelf, travel hundreds of miles, stay soft across changing humidity, and look identical from the first slice to the last requires significant engineering. A long ingredient list isn't automatically dangerous, but it marks a real shift. At some point, a 4-ingredient food became a 20-ingredient product. Most people never noticed when that happened, and nobody asked them if they wanted it to. Number 4. Protein powders. Protein powder leads with a number, 25 grams. 30 grams, that figure sits on the front in big, bold print. And for someone trying to build muscle, recover, or hit their daily protein targets, that number is the reason they're choosing this product over another. But that number doesn't always reflect what the body actually receives. There's a documented practice in the supplement industry called protein spiking. Standard protein testing measures nitrogen as a stand-in for protein. Certain inexpensive amino acids, including taurine, glycine, and creatine, contain nitrogen and can be added to inflate the test result without delivering equivalent nutritional value to the person consuming it. The label reports a higher number than the product actually delivers. Not every brand does this. Many produce honest, well-labeled products, but the supplement category operates under lighter regulatory oversight than conventional food, meaning that gap isn't always caught before the product reaches a shelf. The amino acid profile, usually the smallest print on the container, is the only place where the real picture becomes visible. Number 3. Olive oil. Extra virgin olive oil carries a specific identity. Mediterranean cooking, cardiovascular health, quality ingredients. The bottle looks right. The label reads right. It's also one of the most thoroughly documented categories of food fraud in the world. Investigations across Europe and North America by independent labs, regulatory agencies, and investigative food journalists have repeatedly found that a significant proportion of olive oil sold as extra virgin either fails to meet the legal standards for that designation or has been blended with cheaper oils, sunflower, soybean, refined pomace, or other vegetable oils added to increase volume and cut cost. The fraud makes commercial sense. Real extra virgin olive oil is expensive to produce, requiring high-quality fruit, careful harvesting, and fast processing. A blended product looks identical in the bottle to most shoppers. One practical signal worth knowing: genuine extra virgin olive oil typically produces a slight bitterness on the palate and a mild peppery sensation at the back of the throat, natural compounds from the polyphenols in quality oil. If an olive oil tastes completely flat, like a neutral cooking oil with no character, that's worth noting. The most convincing bottle is sometimes the best packaging for a product that isn't what it claims. Number 2, frozen burgers. Watch a frozen burger commercial and pay attention to the grill marks. Those dark lines crossing the patty surface are one of the most effective visual signals in food advertising. They imply fire, char, effort, making a frozen product look like it earned its flavor. In many cases, those marks were never made by heat. Grill mark effects can be produced through surface colorants, mechanical contact marking, or applied color compounds that create the visual appearance of charring without any flame, smoke, or actual cooking at that stage of production. The marks look like the result of a grill. They're the result of a process designed to make something look like it came off one. This works because of how the brain handles visual information. Grill marks trigger automatic associations, better flavor, higher quality, more care and preparation. The marks exist precisely because those associations are reliable. The eating experience begins the moment you see the lines on the surface, before the first bite. And sometimes, that's the most carefully engineered part of the entire product. Number 1, fast food ice cream. And this may be the most quietly significant entry on the entire list. When you order soft serve at a fast food chain, the cone from childhood, the small reward at the end of an ordinary day, you may not be eating ice cream. Not legally. Not by definition. Sit with that for a second. Some soft serve products at major chains are classified as frozen dairy dessert, rather than ice cream. That classification exists because the formula doesn't contain the minimum milk fat percentage required under regulatory standards to legally use the name ice cream. Instead, vegetable oils and other fat sources are used alongside dairy components, stabilizers, and emulsifiers to produce something that is served, presented, and priced as ice cream, without technically qualifying as one. The difference shows up in how it melts. Real ice cream melts quickly and cleanly at body temperature. Products built on vegetable oil substitutes can behave differently, sometimes more slowly, with a different consistency because the underlying fat has different physical properties than dairy milk fat. Most people have never noticed. The cone gets handed over the counter, the soft serve gets swirled on top, and the experience feels familiar enough that the question never comes up. But for a lot of people, something they've eaten their entire lives without a second thought has never technically been what they always assumed it was. 30 foods, most trusted for decades, almost none of them marketed as substitutes. The point of this list isn't to make grocery shopping feel stressful. It's simpler than that. It's a reminder that a familiar name and a nice label aren't the same as an honest description of what's inside. The food industry is genuinely skilled at building products that meet people's expectations, visually, texturally, and emotionally, without always meeting them in composition. The most effectively disguised products on this list aren't the ones that look suspicious. They're the ones that look exactly like what you'd expect, because they were designed to. The question was never hidden. It was just never asked. Flipping a package over and reading the ingredient list takes about 30 seconds. In most cases, that's all it takes to understand what you're actually buying. The food that catches people off guard is almost never the unfamiliar one. It's the one that's been in their kitchen for 20 years, never questioned, because it always looked exactly right. Which one on this list actually surprised you? Let me know in the comments.